Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Subnet Show. I am your host, Gabriel Cardona, coming to you from San Francisco, California today. I hope you're having an absolutely amazing day. I certainly am. And I am joined by my amazing co-host, the man with the most cats in crypto, Connor Daly. How are you doing, my friend?
Strap in, everybody. This is gonna be a big one. This is gonna be one. I'm wearing my favorite shirt today. My favorite bootleg shirt, my Avox Juice cat shirt.
It's a good one.
As on brand as you can get.
Yeah. I was gonna say, whenever we were first sort of pulling together the Subnet Show and we were deciding what the format was going to be, for example, and I remember Connor, it seemed like a throwaway line at the time. He was like, you can just introduce me as the guy with the most cats in crypto. And I feel like that has become an iconic line now. I see people tag him on Twitter. The other day I saw somebody issuing an NFT of something with cats and he was at the top of the list. I feel like that ended up being a really good, solid tagline for you.
It stuck, and amazingly, several thousands of people have listened to this show, and nobody has DM'd me on Twitter and been like, dude, I have 5 cats.
I know, right?
So nobody's called me on it. So yeah. I get to keep my title for now until somebody gets the smart idea of just adopting 5 cats just to fuck with me.
I've been waiting for somebody to step forward and nobody has done it. Now that we say it, it'll probably happen this week. But okay, so this is going to be a good episode, folks. So in January, I believe January the 3rd was the date, Connor and I had an episode of the Subnet Show that was called Introduction to Subnets, I believe. And basically we did a deep dive into what subnets are, why they're special, how they fit into the Avalanche ecosystem. And that ended up being a very, very popular episode of the Subnet Show. In fact, it is our most popular episode. Pardon me. Today's sitting at over 7,000 views, like 7,300 or something. And so for, about a month or so ago, Connor came up with the idea, now that it's been over 6 months, it's been 8 months since we did that episode, we should revisit that theme and do a state of subnets now that, because we were telling everybody, 2022 is the year of the subnet. So why don't we revisit that theme and kind of get a sense of where subnets actually are? And that was a very, very wise idea. And so we've been resonating on that for the past few weeks. We've been taking notes and we've been swapping notes back and forth. And now we've got, a couple walls of text, and we want to revisit that theme. If 2022 is the year of the subnet, and now we're in August, we're over half of the way through, how are the subnets looking right now? And they're looking very positive. So I think we kind of want to revisit that theme. Connor, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great jumping on point episode for anybody that's been away from the Avalanche ecosystem for a while. We're going to cover basically everything that you've missed in the last 8 months. But if you're here for the very first time, you don't know what subnets are, you probably want to check out our first episode first, because we do talk a lot about, what is a subnet, how does it work? And we're probably not going to touch so much on that today, just because that's a whole hour-long conversation onto itself. So if this is your very first time hearing the word subnet, I suggest you check that out first. But if you're already in, if you want to know more what happened in the last 6 months, where we are, how many production subnets there are, what technology has been developed, that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, so it's kind of the lay of the land, what we should expect to cover by the time the episode's over. Or we want to talk about some of the developer tooling, which has been created since then. So as you know, Connor and I are both engineers. I work on the developer relations squad, and Connor has just been absolutely destroying it lately with regards to, what tooling is not in place, what, if we're asking people to build the great cathedrals, what, do they need hammers and they need nails, right? So what things are not in place for the great engineers to come along and build these game-changing, not just dApps, but subnets, what tooling is missing. So we want to cover some of the different developer tooling that has been created since we last spoke. We also want to talk about subnets which are live today in production. We want to talk about subnets which are live on Fuji, so not quite made it to mainnet, but are live on our testnet. We wanted to give a shout out to the many subnets which are in development right now. There's actually a whole lot of them. We also wanted to talk about, let me scan my notes here real quick. We wanted to talk about some of the custom virtual machines which have been created. And then we also wanted to talk about some of the ecosystem tooling. So this is slightly different than just the developer tooling. You know, obviously developer tooling is created by Ava Labs and it's hyper focused on just engineers, giving them the tools they need to build stuff. But we also want to talk about the ecosystem tooling, stuff which has been created both by Ava Labs and potentially by third-party partners that enables non-engineers, people who are just wanting to partake in the amazing ecosystem of subnets and virtual machines. You know, what is some of the tooling that has been created? So very briefly, I just want to kind of give a super high level. We're not going to dive too deep, as Connor
And
mentioned.
one more thing. We're also going
Please.
to we also are going to mention a little bit about our public roadmap and just what's coming next.
Yes, thank you, sir. Thank you.
So, you know, definitely state of the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And so very quickly, super high level on what are subnets. Again, we won't dive too deep on this. If you want to check this out, we will link to the deep dive on subnets episode in the description box below. If you're an audio listener, you know, you'll have to go find it through one of our social channels. But if you really want to deep dive on what subnets are, go watch that. But very, very, very briefly, in Avalanche, a subnet is a dynamic set of validators working together to achieve consensus on the state of a set of blockchains. And so we have this idea of virtual machines. Virtual machines are the application level logic of your blockchain. You can think about them very much like a class and an object in object-oriented programming. You have a class and it's very much like a template. It describes an object. And then you can instantiate an object many different times. And although all of these objects derive from a common template, they're all unique individual objects and they have their own state. In our world, virtual machines are very similar. So we have these virtual machines. As I mentioned, they're the application level logic of your blockchain. Technically speaking, they are state machines. So you have the state of a blockchain, you have a state transition function, you have an API through which users can interact with the blockchain like a JSON RPC, and then you can instantiate these virtual machines into blockchains. And again, similar to classes and object-oriented programming, though each one of these blockchains is derived from a common template, a common virtual machine, they're all unique and independent entities and they have their own state. And so in our world, you know, one of the amazing things about Avalanche, one of the things that I just immediately clicked with when I very first found out about it is the idea of scaling horizontally. So many people have heard of the so-called blockchain trilemma around scaling. And the way that Avalanche approaches this problem is we envision a world of application-specific blockchains. So today, if you think about something like Ethereum or any one of the different EVM ecosystems, there's one instance of the Ethereum virtual machine in Ethereum, and there's, you know, a bunch of miners mining, validating transactions on that virtual machine. And all of the dApps, which are written in Solidity or a host of other different languages, Viper, and I'm sure there are plenty others, that run on top of the Ethereum virtual machine, they're all competing for the same resources, the same throughput, the same miners. That causes transactions to be expensive. It causes finality to end up being relatively slow. And Avalanche took a very unique path to solving the scaling trilemma of saying, well, why don't we just give every single dApp out there their own instance of the Ethereum virtual machine, let them launch on their own subnet, and then they don't have to compete with any other dApps for any of the throughput, any of the compute resources, any of the validators' attention. And so this allows us to scale nearly infinitely. We envision this world of thousands and thousands of public and private subnets with application-specific blockchains. So literally a blockchain which exists only to run your dApp. And that is going to allow, we already saw this whenever I believe Krabata went live. Correct me at any time, Connor, jump in, but I believe at one time Krabata was like a third of all of the transactions that were happening on the Avalanche network.
Yeah, it was the most popular dApp on Avalanche.
Yeah, and when it went live, all of the gas, when they went to their own subnet, all of a sudden there's all these great stats charts that just show the gas being consumed on the C chain just went like, it flatlined, because all of that throughput and traffic moved to its own subnet. So all of a sudden, all these other dApps which are running on our C chain no longer have to compete with Krabata for throughput and resources and validators. And so the gas went down and the fees went down and the time to finality.
Yeah, we built more roads, basically.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we expanded the highway to add more lanes, and now more cars can go through at the same time. And, you know, the problem in real life is, you know, there's a lot of paradoxes. Well, Where now, if more cars can go through, more cars will drive through, and it'll end up, blocking anyway. But so far, we've seen that demand has not significantly increased, especially in kind of the bear market over the last few months. Of course, you have spikes, and we're still have new users coming in, but so far, the ability to add capacity has so far outpaced increased demand. So from a performance perspective, the Avalanche ecosystem is getting cheaper for everyone, which is a cool thing because, and this is kind of where we envision the cycle of subnets is apps that want to launch, start on the C chain, where you have the most composability and you have the most easy to use, don't have to figure anything out. Everything is plug and play.
All of the users are there. All of the total value locked is there.
Exactly. And then once you kind of reach critical mass, once you build that community, once you have that dedicated group of users, once gas fees are going up because so many people want to use your DApp, then you can transition to a subnet and take those users with you. They get a better experience because they pay lower fees, and the rest of the network also gets to benefit from the reduced from the increased supply and the reduced demand on the finite resources of the main chain.
So I think a good place to kind of begin the journey would be talking about the developer tooling, because of course, for any of these subnets to exist in the first place, there has to be an engineer or a team of engineers out there that built the virtual machine and the subnet. So I think perhaps the best place to start is first we'll talk about the Avalanche network runner. So very briefly.
Actually, I think we should go somewhere else. I think we need to talk about the subnet EVM.
Okay, yeah, let's go there first.
Yeah, if we're starting, all the way since January, we didn't know what subnets were going to look like then. It was very much under development. Nothing was in production yet. And our first production subnet launch was DeFi Kingdoms, which we'll talk about a little bit more later, but that was in May. But what is DeFi Kingdom actually running? DeFi Kingdoms wanted to run the C chain. Mm-hmm. They wanted to run an Ethereum virtual machine instance. And that's what I think most people want. But how do you actually do that as a subnet? Do you just have to run your own instance of Geth, or an Avalanche Go? We call it Core ETH, as our personal fork of Geth that interacts with the Avalanche base layer. So would you just have to fork Core ETH every time? And so this was, I think the first and something that I didn't know that it was happening and it was underway, but when it came out, I was totally, impressed and blown away by how cool this is. So we have something called Subnet EVM, which is basically a customizable C chain fork factory that you can use to create your own EVM-based subnet with your own personalizations. And I know we've talked about this on the show a bunch, because I think the coolest thing about it is you can basically customize your EVM with the JSON file. You don't have to do any kind of code forks. You don't even have to look at the code at all. You can actually just look at a couple configs and a document that explains what each one does. And you can use that to determine how hot you want to run, what your gas and fee parameters are going to be. If you want to use any custom precompiles to restrict contract access.
Talk about precompiles. What are precompiles?
Yes, precompiles are a great term to know. So precompiles are something that exists in the current EVM, but they're a little bit different on Avalanche. So basically, whenever you execute an instruction inside of the virtual machine in Ethereum, in like a smart contract, you execute that instruction in a virtualized environment. And so that means when you do, it ends up getting reduced to some kind of assembly. So if you're familiar with that kind of programming, the instructions are going to look like load this address from memory, add this value to this value, subtract this value to this value, multiply this value to this value, store this value in memory. And that is a super optimized operation in hardware. And your processor can do it in one cycle. But in software, it's much more expensive. I don't know, it might take 100 cycles to do what you can do in one. And so it's really expensive to do these operations in the EVM, but you can actually use something that's called a precompile, which basically runs that operation outside of the Ethereum virtual machine and runs it on your hardware. So it'll actually run that addition operation, not in software, but on your processor where it can happen in one cycle. So that's what, a precompile. And it's really useful for expensive operations like taking hashes, which are things that you have to do quite a lot in smart contract realm. But if you've ever looked at the mathematical definition of the SHA-256 function, it's crazy. It would be, you would run out of gas on Ethereum because it would just be so expensive to do. But on a processor, a lot of processors now even have built-in SHA-256 functions. You can just do it in one step or a couple steps. So it's not a big deal and it goes much faster. So on Ethereum, you can it's possible for the developers and the maintainers to add precompile functionality to the core repository. But the difference on Avalanche is we have what are called stateful precompiles that allow you to interact with the state of the blockchain. So normally Ethereum style precompiles, they don't let you affect state. They can only do mathematical computations like hashes. So Avalanche precompiles are basically, we allow you to do anything. And because of that, we've created some pretty cool customizations that you can make to the chain. So I think we have 4 precompiles live right now. So the first one is native minting. Sorry, I know that's not the one you're showing on screen, but this is just the order in my head.
I got it here. Yeah,
I got
minting native coins here.
Yeah, so minting native coins basically means that you can mint tokens that you use to power your subnet via your gas token. So on like the DeFi Kingdom subnet, actually I forgot what theirs is called. Their DFK token, or on
Jewel,
Krabata,
I believe. Jewel is the DFK.
Jewel, that's right. Yeah. And on Krabata, it's Treasure Under the Sea, or TUS. So you can mint TUS or Jewel from a smart contract, which is necessary if you're going to be bridging your token over from the C chain. So normally in the EVM, the native token is only emitted to validators or during an airdrop. There's no way to like dynamically mint it because you don't want this like on Ethereum. Like nobody should be able to just deploy a smart contract and call mint ETH. Otherwise, it would just break immediately. So what this does is it lets you create a bridge contract, and your bridge contract can then mint your native token. So when you bridge from the C chain into your subnet, you can create more Jewel or TUS. But you can also be maybe a little bit more creative with it. Like I said a moment ago, you only allow, the EVM normally only allows you to distribute your tokens via staking rewards or validator rewards. But let's just say you wanted to give out more Jewel for people who win rounds of the game or something like that. You could actually build more custom tokenomics and build token distribution into your game and use that as your gas token as well. So I think that's a really cool one. So the next one is a contract deployment allow list. And as Gabriel mentioned earlier, one of the visions we have for scaling Avalanche is that we think that you can make application-specific subnets. And to make an application-specific subnet, you have to make sure that random people can't just come along and deploy their DeFi app or their NFT project on your subnet. So you don't necessarily want the world to be able to easily deploy smart contracts on your network. So instead, we have this allow list function that allows you to restrict who can deploy, and then it's an allow list. So the admins on that list can add extra addresses or remove addresses over time. So if you wanted to add people later, you could. And then the next one would be a transaction allow list. So this is similar to the contract deployment precompile, but this one will let you determine who can interact with your subnet, period. And this is a cool idea for building KYC subnets. Basically, you could onboard users one at a time as soon as you've validated their information. And
was this your work?
Yeah, I helped out with it. I didn't do the whole thing, but that was one that I did take over the finish line. Yeah, so that's a cool one. That's probably more useful for private subnets. I'm not sure I've seen anybody use it in production yet. And then the last one is a very cool one, configuring dynamic fees. So I mentioned a minute ago that in your initial Genesis file, you can specify your gas settings for the network, which will determine your network fees. And this kind of gas customization is very much like a Wild West experimental field. There's no, 30-page peer-reviewed academic studies that tell you exactly how each of these parameters behaves and what the optimal one is for your use case. It's definitely as much art as it is science right now. And so a lot of projects are nervous of like, well, what if I pick the wrong parameters? And so before, if you wanted to make this kind of change, you'd have actually had to perform a hard fork on your network where you would have to fork Subnet EVM. You'd have to go in and you'd have to add some code that's like, if timestamp is before hard fork time, do this old thing. If timestamp is greater or equal to the hard fork time, use this new gas setting. And that's a giant pain. So this precompile basically allows you, the admins, to change the fee settings on the fly so that no one is going to be locked into really painful fees if they start spiking in a way that's unsustainable. So this is another one we're really excited for because it just makes building so much easier.
And so one of the reasons these stateful precompiles are so cool is that you can actually do more with Solidity and the Avalanche EVM than you can really with Ethereum right now. And that's not a shot at Ethereum. Obviously, we're all huge fans of Ethereum. We're building with Ethereum technology here. But you can actually do more. As Connor mentioned, you can create precompiles in Ethereum. We're not suggesting that you cannot, but you cannot create stateful precompiles. That is a new paradigm, which is only around on the Avalanche ecosystem right now. And it's just incredibly exciting. So that's
also adding precompiles on Ethereum requires a hard fork. So you'd have to get the buy-in of a lot of parties. But if you just wanted to experiment with this, you can spin it up and test it in production pretty quickly. And I think that's an underrated use case for subnets, is just experimenting with EVM changes and how you can mess with the network. And
absolutely
do cool stuff.
Yep. We envision, like, you guys may know about Kurtosis. Kurtosis is amazing, and we've worked with them a lot in the past. They have this development environment where you can spin up entirely new networks and run a single unit test on a network. And you can imagine doing something similar with Subnet EVM. Say you wanted to make some type of changes and even propose them into the official EIP, Ethereum Improvement Proposal thing for a future hard fork. You could demonstrate the effectiveness of that by spinning up a bunch of different Subnet EVMs in Avalanche subnets and demo the technology to them. So it's not even like it just specifically applies to Avalanche. We imagine this just being incredibly useful for any of the EVM ecosystems out there, of which there are many. So Subnet EVMs is the first piece of technology that we wanted to let everybody know about. It's very, very exciting. I'll very briefly, I won't stay on the Avalanche network runner for long because it's just a local network, but I'll at least touch on it. Last time we spoke, we were using what's known as Avalanche. And Avalanche was sort of like, we were comparing it to our version of Ganache. If you develop an Ethereum, you're familiar with Ganache. It's like a local network you can spin up and do development. But the difference being Avalanche is a simulator. I'm sorry, Ganache is a simulator. Avalanche was a full 5-node network. But it was kind of clunky and it was cumbersome and it was ready for a complete rewrite. So Dan Lane and a couple other amazing people from our team. I think Fabio might have worked on this.
Fabio and Felipe.
Yeah, Fabio and Felipe, absolutely block stars from our team, created the Avalanche network runner from scratch. And it's really, really sweet. So you can do several different things here. So, you can obviously you can install by a binary, you can build from source. But what's really cool is you can spin this up by using CLI statements. Or you can even use a Go run script, which I don't know if I have it here right now, but here's the example. You can use this Go run examples local 5-node network, and it will just spin up a local 5-node network in about 30 or 40 seconds. It takes a little bit because it wants to query all 5 nodes and make sure they're healthy. But then you have a local network, and you can see here, I don't know if it says the port here, but you can actually configure, yeah, 9650, 9652. There's a configuration, a JSON file for each one of these nodes, and you can pass in the different Avalanche Go command line flags. So, you can just totally trick out your own local network, and you can bring up and down networks. You can bring up or down individual nodes. You can add nodes, remove nodes. It's incredibly powerful. Again, Ganache is a simulator. The Avalanche Network Runner is a full Avalanche network running on your local machine. And something I have noticed, because a big part of my job is partner integrations, the developer relations team every day helps on-ramp new teams into the Avalanche ecosystem. And I have noticed that a lot of people don't use local development. A lot of people just go straight to Fuji. Some people just go straight to the mainnet because fees are so inexpensive. But I just really recommend have your workflow be where you first develop on a local network, the Avalanche Network Runner. Then when that works, you take it to Fuji. And then when you're confident there, you take it to the mainnet. For some reason, people just skip this first step of using the Avalanche Network Runner on their local machine, when really it's so much more convenient because you just have all of these hooks and levers where you can trick it out in any way you want. You can spin it down, bring it back up. You have pre-funded private keys, which have funds in the Genesis blocks and vertexes, so you don't have to go to faucets. It's really awesome. So if you're doing development, do not skip and go straight to Fuji. Take your time and use the Avalanche Network Runner. What is the next piece of technology we wanted to talk about?
Well, if we're going to talk about the network runner, we should talk about a tool that is basically kind of a very sophisticated wrapper around the network runner.
Okay.
Which is the Avalanche CLI.
Okay.
There's also Subnet CLI.
Yeah, let's go with Subnet CLI first, because I believe it's on its way out, and Avalanche CLI is ultimately going to be the top of the mountain. Am I correct?
Yeah. Subnet CLI was the first tool that we built to help developers launch subnets, but it was kind of just a prototype experimental tool that has some really great code in it, but the user interface is a little bit of a pain.
Yeah.
And it doesn't do everything you want. It's not really great for doing that like local kind of test environment. It's really complicated to use, but it is really powerful, and it is still our recommended tool for deploying to mainnet for a few more weeks.
Because it has ledger support, which is very, very important. So
exactly.
Yeah, you can use this with your ledger.
But yeah, no, definitely shout out to all the folks who built that. It's got our first couple subnets off the ground.
Sure.
And it's a pretty cool tool.
But Avalanche CLI, which this is your baby, right? Aren't you the one who drove this?
It is.
Yeah,
So
such
yes,
an amazing contribution, man. Great job. Just such an amazing contribution. Yeah.
So this is me being kind of ruthlessly user interface focused, is trying to take everything that Subnet CLI does and add some more functionality so that we can do everything that we need to do. Because when I was kind of making this, I was thinking, as many of you know, I used to work mostly on dApps. Now I work mostly on Subnet related tasks. And when I was kind of joining the Subnet team, I was just like, okay, I'm the most qualified person in the world to build subnets who doesn't know how to build a subnet. As far as like, what's the actual like code and libraries I need to use, I know all the conceptual stuff. I know what they're supposed to be, what the history is, what's coming next, but I just don't know the physical commands that I have to type to make it happen. And so I'm going to have the best possible version of this experience. So any pain I feel is going to be felt by every other person who comes after me. And so
I tossed you the screen to share.
Yeah. So when my experience kind of sucked,
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, this is not acceptable. We're not going to be able to get anybody else to build a subnet just because the process is too complicated. And so that's kind of what I set out to do with Avalanche CLI is, can we make a tool? It's just one tool. So you only ever need to touch one repo to run your subnet from start to finish, which right now it's still at 2 repos. You still need to set up your validator by yourself if you want to do like a Fuji deploy. But even that will probably go away one day. But basically, I just wanted to try to do something that in plain English language, we kind of explain exactly what you're doing so you could launch subnets very quickly. And I'm actually just going to create a brand new subnet for you right now. So this command is called Avalanche CLI, but you invoke it by calling Avalanche. And then there's kind of this subnet, or let's see, I'll just show you avalanche-help. So once you install it, it's a one-line install. It's very quick. There's a couple different command families. But yeah, you
Ooh, I
just want
think
to do
key is
Avalanche.
new. Key is new, right? Network and subnet were the
Key is
last.
new. Key is new. That is our part of our Fuji deploy feature.
Nice.
So that's a pretty cool thing that we've added. So right now, when the tool initially launched, it only supported deploying subnets locally, but now it allows you to deploy them to Fuji via a private key that you just have stored in memory, which is not secure enough for mainnet deploys. So we currently do not support mainnet yet. We will need to integrate Ledger first and a couple other things like helping you do network upgrades so that if you do use this tool, you're not hung out to dry by, kind of going too fast. But yeah, so you can just do something like Avalanche Subnet create, Subnet show, Subnet. And then basically I wanted to make this so that you only had to type in the very basics of the command. One of the things that I really hated about the Subnet CLI was that you had to pass in 10 arguments at each command, like via flags, and your command would be like 3 lines long, and it was just too much. And if you didn't know what you were doing, it was very hard to figure it out. But Avalanche CLI, on the other hand, tries to hold your hand through every process. And basically, my goal is if you run the command and then press enter 5 times, you're going to end up with a good result. So there's a couple things you do have to provide text for, but it's not very much. So choose the type of VM that you'd like to do. So we'll just do a Subnet EVM. Select the chain ID you want. This is one of the places where you do have to type in a number, and then select a symbol for your token, subnet show. Now after this, you can just press enter and you'll end up with something good. Basically, it asks, what kind of gas settings would you like? And, low disk, low throughput, medium disk, medium throughput, high disk, high throughput. It's we recommend you go with the low, but there's also ability to fully customize if you need to. So we'll just say low. How would you like to distribute tokens? You can set up an airdrop here. You can airdrop to custom addresses. We also just set up a pre-funded option where you can use a well-known private key to just airdrop yourself 1 million tokens so you can get started. And then, would you like to add precompiles? If you say yes, you can add any of the 4 precompiles we talked about earlier. Apologies for any of the Windows sounds in the background. So now we've created our subnet and now we can deploy it. Subnet. So instead of subnet create,
before you deploy, can you list with the Genesis file? Can you show that command?
Sure. So we also have you can describe your subnet, and it kind of shows you all of the parameters that are available. Or you can also you can pass the -- Genesis flag, and this will print out the actual JSON file that I mentioned earlier that you can configure. This is what the tool is doing in the background. It's just filling out that JSON folder. You can basically export it with this command. You can re-import it later.
So really just take a second to just be in awe of how amazing this is. You can fire up your own instance of the Ethereum virtual machine with just configuration of a JSON file. The economy of expression here is so incredibly powerful. It should blow your mind. Your mind should be blown right now, basically.
And then you can deploy it too. So we'll do deploy. So mainnet is still coming soon, but local and Fuji both work. We'll just do this locally. And it just takes a few seconds.
And this is using the Avalanche network runner as well, yes?
This is using the Avalanche network runner in the background. So it spins up a 5-node network. It downloads the latest release of Avalanche Go, the latest release of Subnet EVM, and it loads those up. It passes the commands to the network runner to create a subnet, create blockchain, start validating. And there we go. And then it actually sets up 5 different RPC endpoints for you running the Subnet show VM. And then it gives you some nice summary information. So this is the RPC you need to add to MetaMask.
Yep.
This is here's the private key of the pre-funded address you used. If you didn't use the pre-funded address, it won't give you a private key. And then just, the little details. But yeah, this is everything you need to know to add MetaMask, so you could try playing around with it right away.
So without that talking, you can imagine he would have been able to do this in 60 seconds or so. If we were just sitting down and running 4 different Avalanche subnet commands, it's like boom, configure, list, describe, deploy, done.
And we also have tutorials explaining what all the parameters are, but hopefully the tool is so good that you don't even really need the tutorials. Yeah, and then once you're done testing locally, you can actually deploy this to Fuji as well. So that's our most recent release that we put out, enables that process. And we can also support custom VMs as well. Right now, it's only Subnet EVM forks, but I think we'll probably have custom VMs of any type available in the next week or two.
So let's use that then as a segue into the next section, which will be the custom VMs, which have been created since we last spoke. So overwhelmingly, the vast majority of people want to use Solidity and they want to use the Ethereum virtual machines. That's why we have the Subnet EVM and why it's been so popular, and why we've seen some of the subnets, which we'll speak about here briefly, absolutely blow up, like the Swimmer network and the DeFi Kingdom network, absolutely blow up overnight. Because these there's just a very, very rich ecosystem of EVM developers out there. You know, think of all of the different EVM chains from Ethereum to Binance all the way down the line. And so there's a bunch of people out there who know what they're doing. There's, you know, institutional knowledge, there is capital out there, there's teams. So the vast majority of people simply want to use the EVM. And so we have the Subnet EVM and it's very powerful. But at the same time, one of the amazing things about Avalanche is we have this virtual machine idea. And as we mentioned before, a virtual machine is just the application level logic of your blockchain. It's just a state machine. And so there's already been 2 virtual machines which have gone live. Let me find them in my notes here. One second, I apologize. Yeah, so first we will go with Spaces VM. So Spaces VM, actually, let me share my screen. Hold up. Where are we at? Share screen here. Okay, you should be able to see it. So we have the Spaces VM, and the Spaces VM is basically an authenticated hierarchical key value store with EIP 712 compatibility, state expiry, and fee-based metering. And what's really cool about this is there's an entire API around this. So basically, again, it's an authenticated hierarchical key value store. And, you know, distributed storage is something that's very, very interesting. And there's many different paradigms and a bunch of different APIs that you can use. But we believe that this is very much an unexplored territory. And so, you know, again, it's authenticated. It's hierarchical. You can arbitrary key value storage. It's EIP 712 compatible. And then there's even a demo.
The most amazing thing about this to me, yeah, if you go to the demo website, you know, we put up a site where you can interact with this. You can basically, like you said, it's a key value store. So you create basically the name of your space, and then you can figure out what you want to put in it. You can put in any data. But the coolest thing is that it works with MetaMask. Like, right. It's not even an EVM. It's not even close. It's totally something brand new, and you use MetaMask to make it work. You might not have tokens, because I think you have to be airdropped.
Yeah, I was going to do that next.
Actually, you probably do. I think basically we airdropped some tokens to everyone who had used the C chain at some point in time. So yeah, you probably have tokens on all your addresses.
Boom.
But yeah, I mean, this was,
I got some
you have 7,000. Yeah, I love that it works with MetaMask and that it's like compatible. And this is definitely a proof of concept testnet subnet VM. It's not fully mainnet. I think the version was like 008 or something like that. Maybe 002. I'm not sure.
I wanted to demo claiming a space real quick. So we sign a message to then claim a space. So now we have my amazing subnet space. So now, you know, I've just got this space, and I think about it like a local storage or session storage in the browser. I can just start adding stuff to this. So I can add key values. Actually, technically, that's my middle name. And so now, you know, I have my space and it's full of key value pairs and it's hierarchical. So, you know, presumably I can store like a JSON object in here. It doesn't have to be just flat string dictionary kind of relationships with a key value. You could have a string as the key and then, you know, some array of dictionaries or array of objects as the values. And what's going on? A page unresponsive. Okay, so
that's the browser. It's not the blockchain failing.
Yeah.
But yeah, the other thing that's cool about this is I
Boom.
think it is kind of like a blockchain. It does follow like a chain structure with a linear set of blocks. But our next entry on the list
Now, really quick
is
before we go, I wanted to just show you. So yeah, obviously there's documentation here. Everybody go check it out. But it's really cool because there's a Golang SDK. There's also public API endpoints. So this is very cool. This is really well fleshed out. I know Patrick helped drive the charge on this. I suspect it's the same Jen and Gyuho and a bunch of other the same absolute block stars who worked on this. Patrick's team of amazing engineers. But this is really cool. But what Connor was getting ready to say is our next on the list is good old Blob VM. Boom. So this is similar to Spaces VM, but it does away with hierarchical authenticated namespace, user specified keys, and key expiry. So this is just a little bit more generic than the Spaces VM, but it sort of falls into the same category of this distributed storage paradigm. And it's very similar in the sense that it has it's EIP 712 compatible. It also has a very similar CLI, a Golang SDK, and then different endpoints that you can hit as well. And so we have been running bounties around a lot of things are coming into focus where we're trying to incentivize developers to do a bunch of different stuff. And so we're putting out bounties around developers creating distributed storage solutions using the Blob VM and or the Spaces VM. Again, I think part of what we're dealing with here is a bit of a chicken and an egg problem. So most people are just aware of the Ethereum virtual machine paradigm. Most people are just aware of Solidity and smart contracts, and that's just it already is sort of such a big paradigm shift, and it's so transformative. Web3 is such a big concept that introducing new virtual machines is already like, whoa, what is this? This isn't Solidity. This isn't the Ethereum virtual machine. No, my friend, it is not. This is something completely different. And so part of the issue we're running into right now is that, just getting developers aware of these new APIs and having them sort of understand the problem so that they can envision solutions and that kind of stuff. So it's very exciting. We have an amazing engineer who's on the developer relations squad. His name is Raj Ranjan. Raj is absolute champion. He was an intern with us and he recently joined us as a full-time engineer. Raj, if you see this, I love you, dude. He created the faucet, which we'll show in a little bit when we talk about the ecosystem tooling. And he recently created a 3-part tutorial. It's going through all the final reviews literally today. It'll probably be live by the time this goes live on Monday or by the time we record next Wednesday. Unless we take a week off because Connor's going to be in Korea. So we might not record next week. But anyway, we're very, very, very close to having a 3-part tutorial about how to create custom virtual machines in Avalanche where we use the Blob VM as a lens, where we see that problem through the lens of the Blob VM. And I think this is very, very exciting because certainly whenever I go do conferences and hackathons and I'm getting ready to give a presentation at a huge company, if I told you the company right now, you'd be like, no way, they're getting into Avalanche. Yeah. I'm getting ready to give a huge presentation at a big company about how to launch a subnet and deploy your own custom virtual machine. And I'm creating a tutorial or I'm creating my next presentation. I'm basing it on Raj's tutorial because it is just so high quality, where we're finally going to be able to articulate with all of the different APIs and all of the different components that are needed to launch your own custom virtual machine. So we're right on the cusp, we're right on the horizon of a whole new paradigm shift where people are going to be launching their own custom virtual machines, and that is going to be so incredibly transformative. We've been saying 2022 is the year of the virtual machine or the year of the subnet. I have been saying that in a year from now, when you go to the coin market cap, the top 100 coins are going to, obviously it's going to look totally different. It would anyway because of the way the blockchain space works, but I really do believe that the primary driver of innovation behind the top 100 tokens in the coin market cap are going to be Avalanche virtual machines and subnets. It's that transformative of a technology stack. And so, to kind of just wrap this up, just to give you a sense that since we last spoke, Spaces VM and Blob VM have emerged. They're, hierarchical key value stores that allow you to do distributed storage. And they're very exciting. I encourage people to go check them out, especially once this tutorial is live from Raj. You might have a bit better understanding, or once we launch the bounties for people to create amazing tools. We just the other day finished our Subnet tutorial contest, where we had 32,000 in crypto to incentivize developers to create new tutorials. So one of the ways we got Raj on our team in the first place is we had a 50,000, I believe, 50,000 USD competition maybe 6 or 8 months ago for people to write tutorials. And Raj, he's at the time he was a college student from India. He won 3 of those. So, you know, he won a non-trivial amount of USD in crypto. And then better than that, we brought him on as an intern and ultimately hired him. So we just did round 2 of that. It just wrapped up literally earlier this week. We just announced the winners on Tuesday, and we had 5 new tutorials that came out of that. They're so incredibly good. And it was about how to create, you know, subnets and use precompiles and set up your development environment, and how to index a subnet using the graph and all kinds of cool stuff. And so anyway, that's simply to say that we're about to have a really great 3-part tutorial on how to create your own custom virtual machine as seen through the lens of the Blob VM. Very, very exciting.
One last thing I want to toss out about the Blob VM. I'm not 1,000% sure on this, but I'm pretty sure that the Blob VM is not actually block-based. And it is not a linear blockchain as you would think of you know, normally in the blockchain space. And well, maybe this one does have blocks, but one underrated use case of building these is kind of custom virtual machines is they don't need to be block based. You know, the X chain's a DAG, and you can actually basically use Avalanche consensus to solve any consensus problem for any kind of peer-to-peer system. So you can actually do things that are a bit looser with the rules than you might expect, which I think is pretty cool.
Okay, so as we suspected, we had over an hour's worth of time here. I think we started a little bit late, but we're definitely coming up on an hour, and we still got a couple more sections to cover. So let's go ahead and jump on through these. So the next thing we had wanted to talk about were the subnets, which are live today on the mainnet. And so let me go ahead and bring those up. So one of the cool things, it falls into the category of, let me share my screen here. It falls into the category of ecosystem tooling, as we now have this really rad subnet explorer, and there's so much going on here that we could probably spend an hour just kind of going over it. There's a lot of cool stuff here, including tools with the unit converter, contract verifier, etc., etc. You can switch between mainnet and testnet, but you can see here, this is a subnet explorer, and already you can see we have 3 different subnets which are live on mainnet. Of course, we have the Avalanche primary subnet with our C chain. We also have the DeFi Kingdom here. Let me just minimize this and try and get out of the way. We also have the DeFi Kingdom subnet. And one of the things I like about this is this little number right here. So look what's going on right now in real time. In real time, the DeFi Kingdom subnet is doing 11 TPS. And look at these transactions just chewing through. That's just really amazing. And you know, today it has a market cap of 17 million. I believe when they first went live, this number was actually much higher, but you know how sort of the blockchain space works. There's often an initial pump, and then the real value will be found. But this is pretty cool. So do you have any thoughts on the DeFi? What's it say? It says the vision.
I also just love the graphs.
Yeah, totally. So it says the vision for the DeFi Kingdom subnet is to become the go-to location for community members and projects to launch GameFi and other blockchain gaming experiences in conjunction with the primary offerings of DeFi Kingdom Crystal Veil. So you may remember 2 or 3 weeks ago when we had Sol on from Hatchy Pocket, and he had talked about, I believe, WinterNet, which is the subnet they were talking about developing. He had mentioned that one of the reasons they're considering creating this subnet is they want to have kind of a go-to place for GameFi developers to launch. Because, you know, you can imagine that launching your own subnet, there's a bit of a barrier to entry because you have to have full nodes which can validate the primary subnet. And today that costs, or you have to, you know, stake 2,000 AVAX. And, you know, 2,000 times whatever the price is today, $23 or $24 is a non-trivial amount of money. And in theory, you should have a minimum of 5 validating nodes. That's the number that we suggest. And so, you know, all of a sudden you've got to be staking 10,000 AVAX. And that's a non-trivial amount of money for many people around the world. We know that, and certainly on our future roadmap to bring that value down. But today, it's 2000. And so a big opportunity exists for existing subnet owners, or people who deploy their own subnet, to become the go-to place for people to deploy their dApps, especially if it falls into a certain kind of ecosystem such as GameFi, which you guys know we're huge fans of GameFi. And so, you can see here that, the DFK subnet says that they want to be the go-to place for GameFi. Sol said with the Apache Pocket Winternet subnet, they want to be the go-to place. So I suspect that idea is going to ultimately take root and, flower for somebody. Somebody is going to launch a subnet which becomes the go-to place for launching different types of dApps for DeFi. And there might be one that spins up around different types. One of them might be for prediction markets, one of them might be for exchanges, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the DFK subnet. And yeah, we've got just so many charts. Like, again, there's so many stats, it would take too much time to really go through them all, and we don't have the time. But here you can compare two different stats at a time. So you can say, how many active addresses versus how much gas per second. Obviously, you can you can scrub back and forth down here.
I also just love the colors.
Oh, it's beautiful. Everything about this is great. The team that pulled this together right now is just doing such great work. And then
if you're wondering why the numbers go to 0, like at the very end, it's because we just rolled over the day in UTC time.
There you go.
So all the cumulative numbers are low because it's the start of the day.
And so here we have the Swimmer subnet, which, as we mentioned, this is for Cribata. So we met the really cool Cribata team in Lisbon last October or September of 2021. And if I remember, Connor, weren't they deciding at the time whether or not they were going to go live on Avalanche versus another chain? Am I correct in my memory of that?
Yeah, they were. Yeah, when we met them, they were currently in the decision process between Phantom and Avalanche for where to launch. And we sat down and had some conversation in Lisbon, and the rest is history. And I got to meet more of their team in Barcelona, actually, and
nice.
they're fantastic. We've had, if you're really interested in Cribata, we had Jay on the show a few months ago, doing a kind of big feature on it in Swimmer Network. And they just announced today they are doing a partnership with Snake Game, I think. What was it called? Let me not just butcher that. Let me figure out what it actually was. Snake Trail, I think. Let me see.
So this says the Swimmer Network subnet is a custom blockchain built on an Avalanche subnet and is home to Cribata. Snake City, an undersea world filled with fierce fighting hermit crabs called Cribata. The Cribata idle game and marketplace is expected, I think it's to migrate from the C chain onto the Swimmer network, which has already happened. Cribata can be bred and used in games to earn cryptocurrencies with real value, and this was also incredibly popular. And so so these are just the two that are live today on the mainnet. Well, there's 3, including our primary subnet with the C chain. And now you can see here, if I toggle it over to the testnet, all of a sudden we have several more. So we have the Portal Fantasy subnet. It says the primary function of this subnet is to support Portal Fantasy. Our wider vision for the subnet is to lay the foundation for an ecosystem available to future GameFi projects. Projects will have access to proven validators, interoperability, and liquidity solutions. In turn, they save game development time whilst also supporting the subnet. So again, the same sort of vision. It takes time to get validators together. It takes time and resources to stake 10,000 AVAX. Interoperability and having liquidity available and users, all of these things are valuable assets. So, they've already done the hard work of getting this centralized on their subnet. Why don't you, as a game developer, leverage this and launch your game on their subnet? And so again, I suspect this is going to ultimately happen and be very successful for someone, or there might be multiple ones. We have the WAGMI subnet. So WAGMI is We Are Going to Make It. This was also created by Patrick and Patrick's team. So this is a fork of the Subnet EVM, I believe, with basically just like higher throughput and more gas, and kind of pushing the limits of the throughput. And
this is, like I mentioned earlier, how gas fees are the art, not a science. So this is basically a Subnet EVM instance that has the gas fees turned hot. So this should have like pretty low fees, but I think the network responds pretty quickly. It was mostly just kind of an experiment to see, what would happen if we tried to make this thing run fast.
It says it's
And
parameterized to run at a factor more capacity than Fuji Mainnet C chain and will be used to experiment with release candidates before they make it into an official core ETH release. So this kind of speaks to what Connor was saying before, how you can actually spin up your own instance of the Subnet EVM and test future, Geth or core ETH releases, seeing what happens if we have a bunch more gas, what happens if we have, faster block times, way more throughput, how does our actual code and our virtual machine respond to that? And we're doing that here with the WAGMI subnet. And this was real popular, like right after it spun up, we had a bridge and we had a bunch of different games. Like this got a lot of community support. So massive shout out to Patrick for making that happen. One thing I did want to point out real quick is the unit converter here, which is so sweet. So one of the things is I find these huge numbers, dealing with them, or big decimal places, as one of the fundamentally most challenging things I deal with when dealing with this particular development environment. It may seem simple. You may be like, really, out of all the stuff you got to deal with, that one? Well, the reason is because if you're off by one digit, it's a factor of 10. And throughout my crypto journey, I just could name you so many different examples of people who fat fingered some transfer somewhere and screwed it up by a factor of 10. And that just frankly sucks. If it's 10x too little or 10x too much, that's never a good day when you send 10x the wrong amount of crypto. And so these unit converters are absolutely great. And what's really rad about this one is you can actually pick the different tokens up here. And then, so for example, say I want to send 507 of these WAGMI tokens, it will automatically convert them against 11 different the most popular unit conversions you'll see in blockchain development. So this is absolutely great. If you're struggling with these big things like myself, if you just hate typing in a digit with 18 decimal places and whatever, come check out these unit conversion tools, and you can even use the different tokens here, which is very nice.
I hate counting decimals. My trick that I always do is I highlight 3 digits, then I leave the next 3 digits unhighlighted, then I'll click and drag, highlight the next 3 digits. So I do them in 3-digit chunks.
Right, that's a good idea. Yeah, I usually just add the commas and I'll do it in like a text editor or something. Once I got the number correct, I'll just paste it into where I needed to go and remove them. But that's cumbersome. Just using,
I hate it.
Yeah, using these unit conversion tools is pretty rad. So now we have the Castle Crush subnet.
Yeah, this is a really cool one. This is a mobile game that currently exists, developed by Wildlife Studios, who they are working to add crypto integrations with their game. They want to make, I think, every item in game an NFT.
Nice.
And they're doing it on their subnet. And so yeah, we're really stoked to be working with them.
It says Castle Crush is a real-time strategy mobile game published by Wildfire Studios. It is originally a Web 2 game with a new NFT plus crypto layer being added to it through the use of custom Avalanche Subnet. NFTs are playable in-game minions and spells that players can truly own, buy, sell, and loan. A new token, ACS, will power the game's crypto economy. So this is very exciting. You can see I just opened the official site. So this is live, like we said, on Fuji, not yet on the mainnet. Next, we have Swimmer, which we looked at already. And then lastly, we have Dexalot. So the Dexalot Exchange EVM subnet is a revolutionary decentralized exchange aiming at bringing the traditional centralized exchange look and feel through a decentralized on-chain application. Dexalot users can trade crypto securely and efficiently with no slippage or custody risk. It is built on Avalanche's subnet technology, the most effective scaling solution in the blockchain industry, pardon me. So this is the subnet.
Dexalot, it's a great app on Avalanche. It's a CLOB, central limit order book.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're building a subnet. And I have had it on my to-do list to invite them on the show for forever. So maybe saying it publicly will inspire me to do so and reach out. Yeah, because we'd definitely love to have them and talk about that soon.
And then we had just these are the two that I immediately, when I was taking notes before the meeting, came to mind with subnets that are in development but are not yet on Fuji. So I know there's Pirate Verse. We just had Boy on 2 weeks ago or last week talking about the Pirate Metaverse. They're talking about building the Pirate Verse subnet. And then there's also WinterNet, which this was the Hatchy Pocket Team's subnet. But Connor had mentioned there's, I don't know if you know any about
many more. I believe there's over 100 subnets in development right now.
Amazing. It's such amazing.
And I have to give a shout out to Avastan. So the new Explorer that we've been showing you is a product of Ava Labs. And right now, listing subnets is a bespoke process. We do not index every subnet on Fuji. We only index kind of whitelisted ones that we've partnered with in some shape or form. I'm not super privy to the details there. However, Avascan has done an incredible job with their subnet support, and their absolutely winning feature right now is they index every subnet, and it is so cool and so useful to the ecosystem. So I have to give them a major shout out. So there are a lot more subnets that have been deployed to Fuji that are available to be indexed on Avascan.
And they've been awesome from back in the day. I mean, they've been around.
Yeah, they're OGs for sure.
Yeah, there's absolute OGs. I think they even got there, and I think they were even born of funding from Avalanche X. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty
think
sure.
so.
Yeah, they're absolute OGs. We used to have a grant program called Avalanche X. I don't believe it exists any longer. And many of the initial sort of dApps and infrastructure and tooling, which were born from Ava Labs, were created from this grant program. And so I'm nearly positive that Avascan literally got off the ground. I think Kurtosis did as well. Got off the ground with a grant from Avalanche X, and now they just absolutely kill it. And I've hung out with these guys, Jack and several other of them in Barcelona and Lisbon. I don't know if they were in Berlin, but yeah, these guys and gals are absolutely awesome. Block stars, OGs. And so, as Connor mentioned, they index nearly every subnet, he said. So yeah, if you get a chance, check out avascan.info and cruise around on here and figure out what's going on. So there were two last minutes things we wanted to touch upon. We wanted to talk about ecosystem tooling, and then we wanted to talk about what's coming next. So very quickly with ecosystem tooling, we showed you the Subnet Explorer, subnets.avox.network. Go check it out.
Explorer.avox.network also redirects there.
Yeah. Okay, good to know. And next, we want to talk about the core wallet. So you guys remember we had one of our amazing teammates, Max. Was that who it was that came on? Or no?
It was Mac. Nick has also talked about it. We also have Julia and Todd.
Oh yeah, of course. Sorry. Yes, we have four people.
Like 5 episodes on this.
Yes. So this has been we also talked about it in Barcelona on stage with Nick and Luigi. And so Core has been very, very popular. Core is really nice. If you've not had a chance to check it out yet, we're calling it, a Web3 command center. And currently it's a wallet, but there's a lot. I don't know exactly what's public and what's not. But so for here, it says feature highlights include bridge. So here you can actually bridge native Bitcoin from the Bitcoin network into the Avalanche network. And there's already been, it was 50 million a few weeks ago. So I'm sure it's probably 100 by now. But, tens of millions of dollars have actually gone back and forth between Bitcoin and Avalanche network using the bridge. You can swap powered by Paraswap. You can buy powered by MoonPay, and then it's ledger enabled as well. There's even more here: portfolio, collectibles gallery, address book, account switcher, and there's a lot more that's behind the scenes I've seen and that's coming down the pipe. And I don't want to mention what it is because I don't want to step on anybody's toes, but Core is a huge initiative. Nick,
and the reason it's important in the context of subnets is because MetaMask was not designed for Avalanche. Coinbase wallet is not designed for Avalanche. Most wallet platforms are very multi-chain focused, but they don't necessarily take into account the specifics of Avalanche's architecture and subnets. They're used to thinking in terms of like kind of monolithic chains, not modular chains. And so some of the best features that Core has is it's set up to index multiple subnets at the same time. And it's set up to switch between them instantly. So you don't have that like 10-second swap period that you have with MetaMask. And it's going to have all of the capabilities as they're released kind of baked in so that it gets the premier subnet support possible.
Yeah, and it's done really well. Mad props to that team. And then lastly, I wanted to just mention the faucet. We had already mentioned it. This was created by Raj from the Developer Relations Squad. He's an absolute block star. I love that guy. And he currently has all of these different tokens. You can actually do a PR with a JSON file and add your own subnets token to this. So the barrier to entry now to having your subnets custom token be on the faucet, the actual official, Avalanche community faucet, which is run and maintained by Ava Labs, is just a PR with a JSON file. So, the barrier to entry is very low. We encourage you to do this. As you can see, it's already been done by all of these teams. You can just go and, get some tokens from any of those dApps or subnets, because these are not all subnets, right? Like the I don't know how you pronounce that, Digard network and Rise of the Warbots. These are not subnets that I'm aware of. At
I
least
think they are.
Oh, they are. They
Maybe they're
weren't.
not. I'm not actually
They're not on the
1,000% sure.
Subnet Explorer, so yeah, I don't know either. But the point is simply, all you got to do is do a PR with a JSON file, and you can add this. So we're definitely over an hour, and we want to wrap it up with talking about what's coming up next on the roadmap. You want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So we have lots of things we're working on all the time. Some are more public than others, but recently I saw there's a picture going around Twitter that Luigi took of Patrick's, Patrick O'Grady's presentation, VP of Engineering at New York, that talked about our roadmap. So I know I'm allowed to talk about this publicly.
Nice. Critical.
So yeah, we have three big things that we've announced. So the first is permissionless subnets. So I guess one thing we could talk about a little bit would be some of the downsides of subnets, what's not ready. And I think there's two big things that really are not good for the ecosystem right now that need to be improved. And both of these are going to be addressed by the roadmap. So the first is that we only support proof of authority subnets. So what this means is we only support subnets that have a private validator set where they have to be individually whitelisted. So each subnet only has like 5 to 10 validators on it. That's not great. Some networks may want to run like that permanently, but almost all of the networks that we talk to, all the companies that we talk to, want to have hundreds or if not thousands of validators protecting their network, and they don't want it to be a gatekeep thing. They want it to be public. They want it to be decentralized. So that's a tough problem. It's a very solvable problem. It just takes time. And so that's why on our roadmap, the first thing we mention is permissionless subnets. So that basically anyone, any validator on the primary network can stake on your subnet and become a validator and earn validator rewards for validating your subnet. That's one of our biggest tasks that's going to come out in our Blueberry major release. You may have heard the term apricot in the past. We've gone through like 5 phases of apricot. Apricot is over. We're on to Blueberry. And permissionless subnets are going to be the main thing coming in Blueberry. Next, we have the other big problem that we have right now is cross subnet communication and bridging. When you think about having a world where every dApp is its own chain, that kind of ruins all of the interoperability that we had in the monochain world. And that interoperability is some of the coolest stuff about DeFi. Like that's how you get a flash loan and then go use it in another dApp and then go take that and then go to Uniswap or Trader Joe or Pangolin. And like that's some of the coolest stuff that you can possibly do. And by moving to subnets, you kind of eliminate that to a little bit. So how do you compensate for that? And also just fragments liquidity. And the way that you compensate for that is you allow for cross-chain messaging and you allow for seamless integrated platform level bridging. Right now, projects that come to Avalanche and want to launch their subnet, they ask, how do we get our token from the C chain onto our subnet? And what we tell them is, you're on your own for a little bit. You have to provide a bridge. We're not going to recommend a specific bridging solution, but the Avalanche bridge isn't going to support this, and we don't have a native platform solution. So that's not a great answer. That's a very bad answer. So we're working on it. And the way we're working on it is through creating a subnet communication protocol that will allow for asset transfers between subnets. We're not going into any technical details just yet. We do have plans internally, and we do have people tasked and actively working on this. But for one, I don't actually know any of the implementation details other than a very broad sketch of how it works. And two, I don't think we've announced it, so I'm not going to go any deeper. But those two are the mega important tasks right now that I think, if we don't accomplish, subnets will not be a success. subnets, we're very much in the early stages right now. We're talking about early adopters. We're talking about people who, when they do this, have a terrible experience because we're still building the technology. We're building the plane as it's taking off. But this is kind of just like how startups work. This is how new technology works. We find our first customers who are willing to be patient, who, we're not charging out the wazoo to work with us. We're like, basically giving them stuff for free and, giving them all the time and attention that, in 10 years, we're not going to be able to give individual projects that same level of effort because, they're struggling through with us and they're helping, prove the product market fit. They're helping us reveal all of the bad decisions that we made so that in a year from now, we can have a great experience and that we can have the ability to have projects come in and launch subnets and not engage with us in a business relationship where they just read the tutorials and did it and not be like, hey, could you help us? Because these tutorials suck and everything breaks, like that's not what we want. So the last thing on the roadmap is, I think, another really interesting proposition, which is creating more multilingual tools, multi-programming lingual, not necessarily translations, though we do really appreciate our international audience and we do periodically get translations of all of our docs, and I'm sure we'll continue to do that in the future. But from a technical perspective, we're trying to create more tools to allow for more languages to interact with the Avalanche platform. Right now, everything is very Golang focused, and it's hard to say run a Rust VM on Avalanche right now, just because all of the tooling is set up for Golang. So if you are interested in porting any well-known Rust VMs to Avalanche, it's kind of hard right now, but in a couple of months that might be possible, or not might be, that would be possible, and not even possible, but easy potentially. And so we want to make sure that we can grow our library of virtual machines. We want to be able to have developers create whatever their dreams are on Avalanche. And we're maybe a little bit opinionated on the Golang side, but we know that that's not the only popular choice. There's still a lot of people working in C++ land. A lot of people really like Rust. There's also going to be new languages on the horizon. And we want to make sure that our tooling is very agnostic, because anytime you say you can only use our platform if you use our tools, you are cutting the amount of people that can work on your platform down significantly. And that is the opposite of what we want to do. We want to grow as much as we can. We want to be as open to as many developers as possible. And so we're trying to incorporate more tools to make that happen.
And boom, that is it, folks. That is the state of subnets in August of 2022. So since we last spoke in January, over the past 8 months, as you can see, it has been an absolute whirlwind of activity, from engineers to product to biz dev to all across the board. Out of all the teams I've ever worked with, I've said it many times, I'll say it again, Ava Labs is absolutely just firing on all cylinders right now. And this is an absolutely amazing team to be a part of. I always say this, again, I'll say it, this is what it feels like to be successful. So, things move very fast. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of deadlines. There's a lot of stakeholders and a lot of eyes, but this is really what it feels like. So, daily I remind myself to take this moment in time and bottle it up so that later on, if I need to, break it out and remind myself what it feels like to be successful, this is it. And so I'm just incredibly grateful to, Goon and Kevin and John and Ted, all the way down the org chart, Patrick and Nick. I just want to express my gratitude to everybody, to you, Connor, as well. I have so much fun doing what I do every day. The entire community, all of the people that I interface with over Twitter, at all of the different hackathons and meetups, every person who's watching the Subnet show, all of us together are creating the Internet of Finance. And the work we're doing now is going to resonate for generations. And so it's just incredibly awesome. And it's been an absolutely wild ride. And I'm incredibly grateful. So any last minute thoughts, Connor?
I mean, it's just absolutely crazy that everything we talked about happened in the last 8 months, really 7 months. We're at the start of August,
Mhm.
and it's just like, this is why I'm so tired.
Yeah. And there's so much other stuff going on that we can't talk about. Think of all of the different things we couldn't talk about today. There's probably an equal amount of stuff that we can't talk about.
I mean, yeah, we clearly shipped more in 7 months than most companies ship in a year.
Yeah.
And it's a really cool thing to see. And yeah, just I gotta say, it's not just me and Gabriel doing the work. There's so many incredible people there doing such a fantastic job. So yeah, definitely shout out to everybody. It's absolutely a pleasure to do all this, and it's cool being a small part of that. And this is one thing I just love about the job is my previous job. It was very hard to have real world impact. It was very much you build things and they sit on a shelf, and I hated that. But this job is the ultimate, like everything you do makes it out in production. This is how we have shipped so much over 8 months, is because we don't have stuff that sits around.
Mhm.
For the most part, some secrets we might have to take to the grave, or at least not podcast about for a couple other years. But almost everything I've worked on, actually that's not even true. A lot of things I've worked on haven't made it to production, but I have worked on a lot of things that have. But I'm a special case. I think most of the things we touch, it's just like we're very focused on making things that make a difference, making things that will move the needle, making things that will get in users' hands. And it's pretty cool.
All right. If people want to find you, how can they do so?
Yeah. So if you enjoyed this conversation, yeah, you should definitely stick around, like, subscribe, share to the Subnet Show. I think we're going to have some pretty good episodes coming out over the next few months. I think we're definitely doubling down on, getting high quality guests again. And should have a good one in 2 weeks. I'm not sure what we're going to do next week just because of my travel. If you're in Korea, come say hi. I'll be in South Korea this week at Korea Blockchain Week and Avalanche Hacks. And yeah, I definitely would love to meet everybody there. Just look for the ponytail and and yeah, just yeah, please come say hi. But yeah, also you can find me on Twitter. I'm publishing a kind of Twitter thread version of this episode, hopefully maybe around the same time that this goes live. So keep an eye out for that. But I am DAS_Connor, DAS_CONNOR.
All right. Thank you so much. And yeah, you can find me on Twitter, CG Cardona. That's CGCARDONA. Please like and subscribe, share the Subnet Show with your friends. If you have people who think that Avalanche is just a fork of Ethereum, somehow I still see people saying that on Twitter. It's like I talk about misinformed, but yeah, please share the Subnet Show content with them. We've approached we've had conversations with so many different players in the ecosystem, so many different people from Ava Labs, and feel free to share the content. Obviously, go follow us on Twitter, CG Cardona. As he mentioned, next week, we're not yet sure if we're going to record. Potentially will not, because Connor will be in Korea. So just the timing and everything might not make it work. But the week after that, we have a very, very special guest who we've tried now multiple times to get on this show. But you know how it is booking people. Fell through twice now, but it is eventually going to go through. And it's going to be a huge one that people have asked for over and over. So hopefully that'll happen in 2 weeks. And yeah, Connor, just have safe travels to Korea. And I know you're going to have a blast. And so, yeah, we'll see you next time. So we're going to sign off. And so we always say, from Snowflake to Avalanche and through consensus to the stars. Thank you so much, everybody. Peace.